Hi, my name's Hunter Harrison and I'm a wedding and portrait photographer in the Ohio area, and today what we're going to talk about is Visual Supply's new film package. However, before we get started, I think there's a couple things worth noting. Number one, this is the first video we've done, so the production value is a little low. In fact, I'm just using my desktop microphone and I'm trying to do this all in one take, so if I stumble over my words, please excuse me. I think the other thing worth noting is a little bit about my personal style. I tend to shoot for a very natural, bright editorial style. In the past, I've avoided presets and actions completely because what I want is my clients to receive very natural looking images that will stand the test of time. Also worth noting is what I think was Visual Supply's goal, which aligns very well with my goals. They wanted to create a film emulation package, but also stay very natural in all other regards. Because of this, their preset package works very well for me. I actually shoot both digital and film, and with their preset package, I can really make my digital images look a lot like my film images. So for example, if on an engagement session I shoot a couple rolls of film and a bunch of digital, I can use this preset package to make all of the photos look very similar to one another and deliver to my clients a holistic set of images that are aesthetically the same. So from a goal perspective, I think the package definitely works very well for me. So what we'll do today is we'll look at these three images from two different shoots I've done in the past. They've all already been developed with Visual Supply's film package, and we'll walk through some of the high-level features in the film package. We'll talk a little bit in depth, but still stay pretty high level. So I'm going to start with this one here of Elise. And I really like this detail of her cowboy boots. I really like the gesture in her hands. It's certainly one of my favorites. And to start off, after installation, what you'll find is that Visual Supply creates two new preset groups. Now, I bought the Pro package for Nikon, partially because I don't work with any current Canon shooters, so I didn't need the studio version. And the standard version doesn't include the camera profiles, which we'll talk about in a second. So I really think the Pro level, minimally, is where you want to be. But when you do the installation, you'll get two new preset groups. Here I have VSCO Film for Nikon, and the other preset group is VSCO Film Toolkit. That contains some ancillary presets which we'll talk about as well. But I'm going to start off here with the film preset group, and what you have here are all the different emulsions that Visual Supply attempts to emulate. What we'll do is go through each one of these and how they look. I'll do a little discussion. But what I'll start off with first is to go ahead here and click on Reset All. And that's going to take my photo very much back to the way it was imported in Lightroom. I think the very first step you need to do is adjust the white balance. So we'll go here and change this one to 6000 on temperature, and we'll do -10 on the green magenta slider. I just know from experience this is about where this photo needs to be. And what I'll do over here is go ahead and click on Fuji 160C. I think what you can see immediately is that the color and the contrast and the black level of this photo is changed immediately. And I want to talk a little bit about how Visual Supply is accomplishing this. Most important is the camera calibration settings that they're using. Included with the kit is new camera calibration options that you can see here. There's one for each one of the film emulsions. So what they do is they go ahead and set one of these. However, don't just try to set it yourself, because there's a lot of other things going on as well. And that can be seen in the other control panels. You'll see that they're setting recovery, fill light, blacks. They're adjusting the brightness and the contrast. As well, they're applying a custom tone curve. And then when we look at HSL, you'll see that they're making a lot of really wild changes here. And for that reason, you really do need to click on the preset. You can't just simply select the camera calibration profile. So this is 160C. I think what you can see right off the bat is that they do a pretty good job of emulating the film. Here in the darker midtones and shadows, you'll see that it's picking up a little bit of a green cast, something that's very common for color film. Great detail in the midtones, and then especially in skin tones, in the highlight areas, we get a little bit of blown out detail. It gets definitely pretty bright, but not too much so. If we look here at her knuckles, you can see that there's plenty of detail here and in the fingernails. So that's 160C, and I'll just run through the rest here real quick. You have 400H as well. Again, a little greener, a little bit more contrasty. There's Fuji 800Z. This tends to be a little less contrasty, a little bit brighter. And then as we come to our first black and white, and that's Ilford HP5. If you know anything about this film, you know it's actually a color film that produces a black and white image. In this particular preset, we pick up a fair amount of grain. The darks are nice and black, and of course the midtones are nice and clear. They're not too muddy at all. Now we get into the Kodak films. We have Portra 160, followed by Portra 400. I really like Portra 400. If you happen to have a shot that's a little overexposed, it tends to work the best. We also have Portra 800. And then we get into the real black and whites. We have Kodak T-Max 3200. And what you get here is a lot of grain, and the blacks tend to be a little bit brighter. They're not quite into the true black. And of course you can adjust that if you like here with a standard black slider. Lastly is Tri-X 400. I like this one a lot as well. You get very good midtones. The grain is kept under control. And in the black areas, they do get truly to black. Again, you can adjust both the grain and the black to your liking. We'll talk a little bit more about the grain presets in a moment. So I want to run you through real quick how I might go about developing a particular image. So for this one, I'm going to go back to Fuji 400H, which is really the preset I like most for this particular photo. Now, I can also choose between 400H-, which brings up the black areas, but keeps the highlights where they were, or 400H+, and that's really going to darken up the midtones and the blacks. The highlights pretty much stay where they are. I like the more neutral one, so we'll just go with Fuji 400H. And looking at this particular photo, I feel like maybe it's a bit too bright, so we'll pull down the exposure here just slightly. Now I think the midtones are a little too dark, so fill light will take from the standard of 10 up to say 20. And I think that looks about right. I might make it a little bit warmer here, so we'll go to 6100 on the temperature. And I think everything else looks pretty good just the way it is. One thing to note about the Visual Supply presets is they do seem to apply their own sharpening and noise reduction. So I have a preset for that as well, and I'll go ahead and touch on that here. So under my personal user presets, I'm going to go down to my ISO 200 noise reduction. I've tuned that for my camera and my shooting style. And then I have a standard sharpening level that I'll apply myself. So when you work through a image with the Visual Supply package, that's really the order you want to go in. First you want to adjust your white balance, then apply the film emulsion, then make any exposure adjustments you like. You can of course adjust the color as well, and lastly apply your own noise reduction and sharpening. That way you're delivering an image to your client that is sharpened and has the noise reduced the way you want it. So that's an individual photo. And I'm going to jump back here real quick and switch images, and we'll talk about some other things. We have this image here of Tara, and I really like this one. It was actually shot over by Cleveland's Museum of Art, and I'm going to zoom in a bit here, because as we go through the toolkit presets, I want you to get a real good sense of how the image changes. So under the presets, I'm going to switch here to the Visual Supply toolkit and kind of walk us through each one of these items because they're important as well. Up top, what we have are some standard ones. We can do an auto black level, auto tone, and black level set to 0. Those do exactly what you would think they would do. Then we have a group of about 5 other presets here for black and white and color, darker skies. And what these are going to do is really darken up the blue in a, say, landscape photo. really the way they accomplish that is simply by dragging down the blue luminance in a particular photo. Next up is greener greens. You have 3 different levels. Film emulsions can really take green colors in the shadows and shift them to blue, and of course Visual Supply emulates that as well. If you don't like that shift to blue, these 3 presets will help you kind of shift your greens back to a true green. Next up is the orange skin fix. With certain photos, you can kind of get an orange shift in the skin tones, both in Visual Supply and real film. And these 3 levels help to correct for that. They're doing so by adjusting the orange saturation, so if you have other important orange objects in your photo, just be mindful that they may be affected as well. Next up is saturation. A couple of the presets can be a little high in saturation, so you have a saturation minus and double minus, and this can help to kind of bring back down that saturation. 4 that I really like are these 4 contrast presets. We have double minus, minus, plus, and double plus. I'll go ahead and start clicking on these. This can really help you to hit the right contrast level. Double minus, as you see here, is maybe a little flat. Contrast minus seems to be where most of the presets will put you right off the bat. I happen to like this for this particular photo. Contrast plus is a little bit hotter, and contrast double plus is certainly very extreme. These 2 might work best if, say, you were shooting into the sun and got a little bit of lens flare and that flattened out your contrast. So I'm going to go back here to contrast minus. Next we have the faded group. We have faded, faded plus, and double plus. What this is going to do is kind of give an aged look to your photo. What it'll overall do is bring the shadows more towards the midtones, the highlights more towards the midtones as well, and it will certainly age the photo. If you know Jonas Peterson, you know he uses a little bit of this style, so this can help you to emulate that if you like. Faded double plus is certainly very extreme. I'm going to go ahead and back out of these so I can show you some other features. Next up is faded highlights and faded shadows, and these do exactly what you would think. I in particularly like faded highlights. Some of the presets can bump up the highlights a little bit too far so you lose detail. A simple click on faded highlights will bring that back. I'm not sure if you can see it in the video, but we did gain a little bit more detail here in Tara's scarf. There's more in the faded group. Here we have faded toning for Fuji, Fuji 2, Kodak, Kodak 2, and Kodak 3. These are presets that I think are included for the standard package, so in cases where you don't have the camera profiles. I personally don't use these because I don't like the results very much, so we'll go ahead and leave those alone. Also worth noting is the faded and toning groups for cool highlights and creamy highlights. I'll go ahead and click on creamy highlights. I think right away you can see the color shift. Basically what this preset does is apply a split toning to the image. I personally think that the saturation is a little too high, kind of gives that pea color. Of course I have the option to drag down the saturation if I like. So that's creamy highlights. Cool highlights does the same thing but shifting more to the blue color. I'll go ahead and undo those settings. And next we have fill light. There's 4 different settings for fill light. Those pretty much do exactly what you would expect. So I can set fill light to triple plus, then double plus, and then single plus. We'll go ahead and leave that one on single plus. Next up is grain. I actually use these presets a lot and I think they're very important to discuss. The film emulsion presets, as standard, apply a pretty healthy amount of grain, and I personally like it. I like some grain in my images, especially my personal work. However, I think that my clients may not appreciate it as much as I do, so I very often will either turn grain off, or more commonly I'll just use grain plus. This will bring down the grain level a little bit compared to the standard presets. You also have the choice of grain double plus, and here with triple plus I think you'll really see it in the video. This very much looks like the grain you would see in, say, a Delta 3200 film from Ilford. So we'll go ahead and set that back to grain plus. There's 2 more grain presets that could be handy. It's grain bigger for web and grain bigger for web plus. These set the grain very high so that when you export and then downsize an image for web display, you can still see that grain level. Next up, we have some toning settings, one for green shadows and one for magenta shadows. These apply a tone in the darker areas, mostly to simulate what film would look like if it were underexposed. Underexposed film can really pick up a green cast in the shadows, so these presets are designed to emulate that. Lastly, there's some vignette settings. I won't touch on those. I will say that overall they're pretty mild, which is, in my neck of the woods, is certainly a good thing. So those are the main features of the various presets that come with Visual Supply. I'd like to take a minute and talk about some issues you might run across, and I'm going to switch over to this image of Elise sitting on top of her Mercedes. My tendency is to shoot a little hot, again going for that very bright editorial style. Visual Supply doesn't seem to work well with an image that's, say, a third or two-thirds of a stop overexposed. Skin tones in particular can wash out. I think you can probably see that here in Elise's face. Of course, you can bring back down the exposure some, but that can make other parts of the image look a little bit muddy. So overall, what I would say is Visual Supply works best with a exposure done on an even keel, or even maybe a third or two-thirds of the stop underexposed. So definitely watch out for overexposure or any particular highlight areas. The other thing worth noting is, again, that tendency for the presets to affect both the sharpening and the noise reduction. Just be prepared to have your own presets created to reset those to the way you want them. So that's all for today. I hope you appreciate the overall walkthrough. Definitely check out my website at hunterphotographic.com, where we will be doing more for photographers in the near future, including some recipes for Visual Supply I've been working on. You can also find us on Facebook at facebook.com/hunterphotographic, where you'll see more of our current work and stuff that's not quite on the website just yet. Thank you very much, and have a great day.